Welcome, everyone. By way of starting, I'd like to just ask you all to take a deep breath. And as you exhale, let your shoulder blades melt down your back like chocolate. Take another deep breath and just melt those shoulder blades all the way down your back like chocolate. And another one. And just feel that ganache just going down your back, bringing you more fully into the present here together with us all for this talk and experience this evening about somatic nervous system regulation, which is something that I recently found out that I have been doing for many years, and I wasn't even calling it that. A little bit about me. So, as Nikki said, I am many things, but I've been a dancer since day one. I'm a native of Macedonia, so I was brought up in the Balkan circle dances, where the community dances in a circle, in rhythm with each other, those feet in rhythm together, like many traditional peoples. Years later, I would realize that that form of interaction with each other is something that neurologists nowadays call co-regulation. So when we are in rhythm together, we build this unseen sort of nervous electromagnetic synchrony with each other. And many traditional peoples have this. And there's even research that has shown that people who have been colonized and whose rhythmic, tribal, traditional practices have been stamped out by the colonizing force, that those people started to die earlier. They would develop chronic illnesses. They would, their social fabric would fall apart. And so studies have shown that these ancient practices are a way of the bodies, the body of the community signaling to the psyche of the community that we are all together, we are all in this together, you are safe here, this is us. So those are my roots in dance, and then as life went on, I went on to study other forms of dance, became a dance teacher, opened a dance studio. I studied and taught physical theater. I was a classroom teacher for a long time in the international schools of Brazil and Malaysia. Worked with kids. Hi. That's okay. Come on in. So I worked with young people in the classroom. Worked with young people in the classroom, but also in embodied practices in theater class and dance for kids. So in 2010, after teaching around the world, I moved back to Brazil and I started my research project on movement as a way of preparing the body for a better version of the whole self to be able to come through and inhabit. And so some of the questions that were driving my work were how does movement help us heal? How does the body's movement serve as a metaphor for inner processes? And this is something that we're going to try out a little bit later when we do the somatic practice. And then I wanted to know if we can intentionally shift our emotional and psychological states through movement. So if I build will it come? Type thing, like if I stand in my power, will I feel powerful? If I embody my equilibrium and my equanimity, will that actually then bring about that desired shift in my overall state of being? So I was very, very, very interested and turned on by all of these questions. And I'd been working with all of these different modalities, and then I retired to my little spot in the coastal rainforest of Sao Paulo to start writing my book about it. So one fine evening, with all of my notes and my books and my Post-its and everything, I sat down to write my book about this theory of mine. So there I was ready to get started, and then life handed me an experiment to test my theories on that night. As soon as I started writing, the wind started to howl. The rain started coming into the house sideways. I went and I battened down the hatches. I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a pretty intense storm here." Went back to my writing. My cats were all around. I even had a bottle of wine. I had some tea in case that was what I needed. 20 minutes later, I heard my neighbor lady screaming my name, and I went out to the balcony to respond to her, and I saw that I was now surrounded in a lake of swirling water. I couldn't even see the top of my car. My neighbor lady was yelling at me to let me know that she had my dogs, because my dogs would go back and forth. And yeah. So talk about getting dysregulated on that night, my nervous system getting dysregulated. And the topic that I had most recently been ruminating about that evening was I was writing about the wisdom of the feet. The wisdom of the feet, because as dancers, we need to be able to trust our feet, right? We need to be able to know that our feet have that contact with Mother Earth, that the force of gravity is my friend, and that my feet have consciousness. And your feet actually do have a lot of consciousness. When's the last time you thought about the consciousness of your feet?
When I was trying to take a tango class.
Yeah.
So a while ago.
And there are multiple millions of nerve endings on the soles of our feet. The soles of our feet are actually a neural map of the entire body. I mean, that's where reflexology comes from, and so on and so on. The power went out.
Of course.
I heard trees crashing. The hair on my neck stood on end. My heart started, oh, I'm sorry. Was that bad? Was that bad? My heart started palpitating. I broke out in a cold sweat. And then I said, wait a minute. So I lit a candle. So that's all I could see by. I went and I stood in the middle of my house with my hands on my hips. And I breathed down into the wisdom of my feet. And I sent out feelers from my feet to go downstairs and to have a look around and see, confirm, is my house going to be swept away by this, torrential downpour? What's going to happen? And the more I concentrated on my feet, and the more I concentrated on staying grounded, staying centered, the calmer I became. And then a message came back, and it was an embodied message. It was that felt sense of, girl, you're fine. You're fine. You're going to have a mess to clean up tomorrow, but you're fine. Go to bed. There's nothing else you can do. So I went to bed, and I slept as that storm raged, and then the next day woke up to some pretty bad devastation in our region. Most people had it way, way, way worse than me, but we needed to band together as a community because I love Brazil, but there is no 911 there. And there is no Coast Guard that comes to help. And, so we really had to band together. We had to band together to dig each other out. We ended up getting a brigade of longboarders to pull people out of flooded areas, one child by one child. We had a rope across the rivers, and the longboarders would go, And so I rolled up my sleeves and said, okay, we got to get to work. This is a community thing. We got to, we're in this together. And yet I couldn't sleep. And every time it rained, I slept like this. One eye open. My heart would palpitate. I was traumatized. I was traumatized. So in the weeks that followed, it took about a month and a half to clean up and to, help everyone and, get people into the high schools and get donation platforms set up and all of that kind of thing. Time and time again, I would find myself doing something normal and then all of a sudden, so I'd go back to my notes because I had been pulling out all of these different techniques. How do dancers have to get grounded? How do they get centered? How do they return to a sense of balance? And so I was using all of these techniques without knowing that what I was actually doing was nervous system regulation. That's a little bit of my story. Hi, Drew. So our nerves, right? We are electromagnetic beings in an electromagnetic world. The language of the nervous system is the language of electricity. Our nerves, our nervous system is our circuitry. So it's those energy pathways that regulate our life functions, right? Channeling our vital energy throughout our body. It's our communication system, the way that the brain sends signals to the different parts of the body. Move your arm, digest this, release an egg, So transmitting signals between the brain, the body, and the environment. Our sensory input, it comes through our nervous system. So it also interprets stimuli. And it enables our bodily awareness, which in nervous system regulation, we call that interoception. That ability to go inward and to perceive your body. How does it feel? What's happening? What could I fix right now that would help me feel better, that would help me return to balance? And then, of course, it's the circuitry of our emotional and cognitive processes. So integrating our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and then nervous system regulation takes that one step further and connects that to the somatic nervous system of the body, okay? Because what we think and what we feel and how we process stimuli from the outside world causes the nervous system to react. If you hear a loud noise happen, a sudden loud noise, what's going to be the way that your body reacts, right? So I really like to think about metaphors and how we talk about people who are apt, who are resilient, who are courageous, intelligent, or the opposite of that in terms of nerves and the nervous system. So I was thinking about that the other day. I'm not wired like that. How are you wired? When was the last time you talked about how you are wired? Nervous. You could be nervous like a bridegroom waiting for the bride to come down the aisle, or you could be nervous like someone waiting for the jury to pronounce a sentence on you. So it affects us, doesn't it? The body knows, and the body keeps the score. When was the last time somebody got on your nerves? Right? When was the last time that you described an experience as unnerving? Even saying those words, we immediately tense up, we embody that feeling, don't we? I know a lot of people that got a lot of nerve. And you can have a lot of nerve in a good way or in a bad way, right? Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's that expression, nerves of steel. Why, she's got nerves of steel. And everything that comes with that. She's resilient. She can put up with a lot. She's courageous in facing down danger or challenges, you know. But this also points to this idea that society trains us to put up with it, endure, steel your nerves, you know, and then we get to a point where there's a breaking point as well. So we also talk about people like somebody that's really intelligent. Ooh, she's really got her synapses firing, doesn't she? You know? Or that person is really, really switched on. So when we examine our metaphors, we can see that the way that we talk about people who exhibit these factors and a host of others, a lot of it is in the language of the nervous system. And I'm really into metaphors because I really believe that the body's movement is metaphorical for inner processes. And when we can see the potential of that metaphor, that we can use the metaphor with the movement to change our lives. So just a quick glossary of terms here. The nervous system has many parts, and I didn't want this to be a deep lesson in the neuroscience of it, but it is important for us to know. So you've got your central nervous system, which the brain is the boss, right? It controls your thoughts, your emotions, your memory, your coordination, and many of your body functions. Okay, the brain and the spinal cord act together as a communication highway, and it facilitates your reflexes and it transmits signals to the body. Then we have the peripheral nervous system, which connects the central nervous system to the rest of the body, and it is further divided into these two branches: the somatic nervous system, which manages voluntary movements and sensory signals. So when you're exercising, when you're dancing, you're really exercising that somatic nervous system because you are willfully, right? You are making that move, you are moving through space, you're making shapes, you're doing all of that. And then there's the autonomic nervous system, which regulates involuntary functions like our heart rate, our digestion, our breathing. And this is the one that we're particularly interested in with nervous system regulation in combination with the somatic nervous system, because 80% of all of the nerves in our body are afferent nerves, meaning they carry information from the body back to the brain, which is why a somatic approach to integrated well-being, meaning mental, physical, and emotional health, cannot be overstated. Traditional therapies like the talking cure, you know, mindset, different kinds of therapies that are more based on cognizing and talking. They are powerful and they help, but it's only 20% of the solution, because you can't talk your way out of a broken leg. You can't talk your way. You probably can talk or think your way sort of out of a traumatic flare-up. But the thing is if you're traumatized, if you're stressed, if you're burnt out, your body is already in a state where it's constantly giving that feedback to your brain. I'm not all right. I'm not all right. I don't care what you say. I'm not all right yet. And then, of course, so we're going to be talking a little bit about the sympathetic nervous system, which activates the fight or flight response. Who here has never heard of the fight or flight response? Oh, good. We're a focused audience. I really like that. And then the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes the rest and digest functions. Every time you engage in a breath cycle, you are activating your sympathetic and then your parasympathetic nervous systems. When you inhale, you're activating the sympathetic. When you exhale, it's the parasympathetic nervous system. So we go from activated or upregulated to relaxing and downregulated. You inhale when you're getting ready to do a motion. You exhale when you're doing it. Make sense? And then, of course, there's the enteric nervous system, which is, it's been called the second brain, your gut brain. And these all work together. And unfortunately, stress, overwhelm, trauma affects it affects the whole body, but it registers most deeply in these three parts of the nervous system. So this is the NeuroFit ring, and it's a simplified way of showing some of the different nervous system states as we perceive them through the parasympathetic and sympathetic angles here. So up here at the top, this is your peak parasympathetic state. It's called ventral vagal. And when you're in ventral vagal, you feel warm, you feel comfortable, loving, compassionate, you're open to others, you're open to connection, right? When you come over towards stillness, you're starting to down-regulate a little bit. You're relaxing, you're peaceful, you're serene. Maybe you're not up for a whole lot of interaction, but you're also not shut down. As we come down towards the sympathetic, the next phase here, especially when you factor in overwhelm, stress, trauma, as we start to get down into this region here of the extreme down regulated, we've got dorsal vagal, okay? And that's when you're feeling really numbed out, you're dissociating, you're shut down. Your stress response has been to retreat because there's fight or flight. So you can either engage or you can retreat. And you can think about when you have felt this way, right? Down here, we've got overwhelm. I call this is when my engine light is on. Who's ever had their engine light on here? Right? It's just all too much. You feel like you're going to shut down. Panic attacks happen here. The stressful, the despair. This is when those looping thoughts start to come through, right? Who's had that? You're just, the OCD, the looping thoughts. It's like, and it won't let you sleep. And yeah. And then it starts to shift over into the sympathetic. And I know the word sympathetic sounds, sympathetic. But in the sympathetic state, this is fight. You've had it. You're anxious, you're tense, you're angry, you're irritated, and you're ready to go, right? And so I saved this one here for last, the state of play. When we're creative, when we're upbeat, we're lively, we're energized, and we're ready to interact with others. Because when you play, you're slightly toggling back and forth from both states, right? If you think about sports, for example, especially competitive sports, doesn't it really need to toggle between these two in order to really get into that sports action? You've got to view the other team as the opponents, and even a lot of the ways that we talk about sports, especially team sports and competitive sports, again, metaphors. In the language of war, they faced off on the field. the quarterback is the general, you know, and that sort of thing. So, yeah. So I want to just ask you for a moment, take a moment, and really think about where on this ring right now that you would identify yourself. You don't have to share it, but just be honest with you. You want to share?
Sure, yeah. Well, so I'm an animator, and I'm constantly in the play section. You know, I'm always doing creative stuff. I gotta be upbeat, I gotta be lively, I gotta be energized. And I find that if I stay in that state too long, I end up in the anxious, tense, and angry state. So I have to go into the stillness area consciously at like different points during the day so that I don't end up in that sympathetic area.
Totally makes sense, and you've identified something, especially in the neurofit way of looking at this. The antidote to being here is to go for stillness. Yeah, I can tell that you're a really playful person. I really love that. Anybody else want to share where they're at?
I know.
Yeah.
I generally toggle between the ventral vagal and then the sympathetic, and I absolutely deal with it with stillness.
Mm.
But it's like ventral vagal, I love everyone, super, and then I actually deal with people, and I'm like, I'm like, I get overwhelmed, and so then I'm like bringing it all back down. But also the play too is kind of, I'm in ventral vagal or play generally, and then anything throws me into sympathetic, and then I run back to stillness. So I'm kind of all over.
I mean, we all are
Yeah.
all over the. Hi. We're all over the chart, aren't we? Yeah. Would you like to come and sit? Interestingly enough, you know, learning takes place best when we're in play, right? When there's pleasure, when there's a sense of, you know, social flow with others. And this is where our social nervous system really has a chance to co-regulate with others in that healthy way. I've been here quite a bit lately, you know? And so my go-to is to play. So playing with movement, and you know, I teach about 6 dance classes a week, and I'm so glad that I do, because it gives me a chance to be with people with the music on, and we're all enjoying ourselves, and you can just stop cognizing for a while, get down into your body, you know, start moving, getting your metabolism up. And I really believe that we also have an emotional, mental, and spiritual metabolism too. You know, we call it processing, don't we? I need to process. I need to process this, right? I need to digest what's happened to me, and so on and so on. And so, you know, my idea has always been that the metabolism of the body, moving the body, can help speed up the metabolism of the emotions and the psyche and the soul. So here's what happens with chronic stress overload. Do you see yourself here from time to time? So the allostatic load, okay, this is how much your body can bear. This is like the extent of the limit of how much your nervous system can bear, right? And what tends to happen to us is we're doing it, and then bang, your engine light comes on. And then your body is going to start giving you certain signals that you have gone too far. So as I was telling you about the story with what happened to me in the jungle, I had hypervigilance. Anytime a raindrop would fall, for months afterwards, I'd be like, oh, you know, oh my God, I'm going to check the river. Oh my gosh. I had sleep issues. I couldn't sleep. Brain fog is a symptom of a dysregulated nervous system. Because remember, they all work together. So we've got our enteric, we've got our somatic, we've got our afferent nerve system. When the digestion goes off, the brain fog comes in. And also, when we're in chronic stress mode, the brain learns to start conserving energy. So what it'll do is it'll start shutting down that prefrontal cortex, because most of the activity is in, you know, the brainstem and the fight or flight, and you know, those parts of the nervous system that help keep us alive. Chronic pain. You know, another metaphor there. Oh, it's a pain in the neck. You know. Emotional sensitivity. Do you blow up at the drop of a hat? Well, that's another sign that your system is really overloaded. Your nervous system is overloaded. So irritability. Numbness and dissociation, that kind of tends to be my go-to too. Like when I get overwhelmed, I'll turn into a hermit. I'll go into my little cave. OCD, those looping thoughts. Hi, I'm Sophia, and I have looping thoughts. Procrastination is another one. Not ever really feeling like we can get up and go, it's just because the thought of doing it just brings on more of a stress reaction, so we tend to just kind of spin our wheels a little bit, right? So, do we have any questions or comments or thoughts before we move on? All right. So, very soon now, we are going to experience a mini somatic nervous system reset. We're going to get up and move around. We're going to get rid of these chairs. We're going to put them off to the sides. I just want to share that nervous system regulation, especially in the world that we live in today, against the backdrop of a highly activated collective. The air, the atmosphere is literally crackling and rippling, isn't it? We need to lean into resources that we have, like this practice, that can help us maintain physical and emotional balance, homeostasis, to help us process our emotions, metabolize our emotions, digest and move through those traumatic events, and not only traumatic events, just the memory of a traumatic event will already activate you somatically in the same way that the traumatic event, the original traumatic event itself did. We need healthier ways to build the resilience that we need to engage with an increasingly complex and complicated world. Because you know how we normally deal with this? Pharmaceuticals, alcohol, drugs, risky behaviors, being nasty to each other, road rage. Thank you. Yeah, let's name a few other ways.
Self-sabotage.
Self-sabotage.
Any kind of addiction.
Any kind of addiction, right? And so what if What if all the tools and all the processes that we need to bring greater balance into our lives and to create a better here and now, better state of being for ourselves, is right here. Right here. Again, mindset is only 20% of the solution for chronic stress and dysregulation. By working through the body signals back to the brain and to the psyche that I'm shifting now. I'm feeling better, therefore so can you, right? Again, build it and it will come. So by consistently engaging in intentional body-based practices, like the practice that you are about to experience, we can access the innate wisdom of our bodies. We can overcome resistance to change because, you mentioned self-sabotage. How many of us desire to do better, to be better, to evolve, and yet you still have that resistance to that change and you can't quite put your finger on it? Well, we're going to put our finger on it tonight. So we can release trauma, and we can cultivate a sense of peace and tranquility and resilience so that we feel empowered to navigate the challenges of life with greater ease. And a quote from one of my favorite ladies. Oh, sorry, there she is. Has anyone ever heard of Gabrielle Roth?
Yep.
5 Rhythms. So right around this time, I was the first person to bring 5 Rhythms to Brazil. So I was translating all of it into Portuguese and, just really engaging with the material in a new way. When you have to translate it into a new language, you really have to engage, and there was no ChatGPT back then. But it was so amazing. Weirdly, I had organized a workshop. I had brought a woman from New York to teach 5 Rhythms in Brazil for the very first time. Guess when that was?
COVID.
No, it was about 2 weeks after I got everything all cleaned up from the flood.
No.
Yeah. So everybody said to me, "Oh, just cancel the workshop. Just cancel the workshop. You've got too much to do, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, no, we're going to do this. We're going to go through with it. And I'm so glad I did.